My name's Aimee Altman with Anchorage Press. I am the author of the Green Tara Cannabis column, and I'm here today with my best friend, Sara Stewart, and we're here to discuss the topic of parenting and pot. So I just want to take a quick minute to introduce myself. I am a mother of two. I've got a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I live in a combined household, and together we have 5 children in our home, ranging from ages of 17 to 6. And Sara, how about you? What do you have in your house?
I have 3 children, age 17, 13, and 11.
And together we've noticed that we're coming into this new time of talking about parenting and weed. And we're finding that our conversations are interesting. We don't always know exactly how to broach the conversation with our children. And so we wanted to kind of set a little bit of an example for that here today. So Sara, I wanted to start out by asking you, what was your first experience with cannabis?
When I was about 13, I found a bag of my dad's very old weed under his bathroom sink, and I took a piece of notebook paper and attempted to roll a joint.
Were you successful in this?
Not really.
And do your parents know that you did this?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. I wonder how your dad will feel hearing this. And then the kids in your home, what's that look like right now? What's the vibe with weed in your house and the kids?
With my 17-year-old, I have a much more open conversation now that legalization has happened. It's sort of something that's evolved over the last year. And with my 2 younger ones, we are talking about it more and trying to normalize the conversation so that when they hear keywords like cannabis or marijuana, that they are not viewing those as taboo words, that it's sort of normalizing it kind of on the level of alcohol or beer or wine.
Okay. One thing I want to note here too between Sara and I is that Sara, besides being my guest here today, she's also my best friend since we were 11 years old. And besides being best friends, our children are biologically cousins. So raising our children together is something we've had the lovely opportunity to do. And now with Auntie writing about cannabis, it's become a pretty common word in our households. And so it has sort of started these conversations a little bit, I think, too, besides just the legalization aspect of it. But have you had any experiences with your daughter regarding weed at all?
I have. She has generally been a good kid that doesn't get in trouble. She's been allowed to drink for a few years. We've traveled internationally, and it's been no big deal for her to have a glass of wine at dinner or a cider when we're out camping. But still, I had not really expected. About a year ago, we were out at our family's cabin for New Year's, and I happened upon the kids in a bunkhouse, and I happened upon them rolling a joint, and that was a bit surprising.
Yeah, how did you respond when you walked in on this?
I immediately threw myself on the bed and just observed while texting you to come help me deal with this, because I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to say. My parenting style is not one that I freak out. I don't start yelling and ranting, and so that wasn't how I was going to approach this. And my views are that it's a lot like alcohol, where I think you need to wait until you're of age. Your brain is still developing. But like alcohol, kids are going to get a hold of it, and they're going to experiment. So I wanted to not freak out on them so that I could keep the conversation open and not come down on them so hard. Mm-hmm. So I texted you and asked that you would come help me deal with this.
Yeah. I believe the text looked like, get to the bunkhouse now. So
my internal freak out was going on. My external was trying to keep cool.
yeah, that I have to say was not at all what I was expecting to find when I walked into the bunkhouse. And by then they had lit it. And so I walked into the smell of it. And my initial reaction was a couple things. One, these weren't my children. They were my children in my family. So I was a little bit more separate, I think, and maybe not as emotionally riled up as I would have been if it was my own kid. And so my response was just to sit down with them, and I wanted to know exactly what they were doing. I wanted to know what they were smoking. I wanted to know where they got it. I wanted to know who rolled that. And then I also asked them to light, maybe they hadn't lit it yet. I asked them to light it there, and the look of shock on their face was just horrific. I think you had left by then. So I remember I sat down, and then it seems like you were like, I can't do this, and walked out. And so we did have a moment discussing it with them about, those things of, do you even know where you got this? Do you know what this is? Who rolled this? And looking at it, I could see that this clearly wasn't their first time. And so those were more of my thoughts on it, was not, witnessing teen cannabis use, because that's something that was part of my story when I was a teenager. So the concern was more things like, do you know what you're even smoking and what you're putting into your body? And that later became a conversation in our house as well, too, because what we ended up determining at the end of the day was that weed had actually come from my home, and it had been stolen from my stash. And my concern was beyond teen use into the behavioral aspects of taking things that don't belong to us. And so that became another parenting conversation. And in the end, we made the child give us money for what he had taken. And I felt, all right about that. But did you end up having a conversation with Izzy after that? Or
We did. It sort of opened a path for us to continue having conversations, and how I don't think that you're going to suffer from reefer madness if you smoke it, which is what we had grown up was, marijuana is bad and you need to keep it as quiet as possible. And so in being able to mention it to my daughter, and then using the words marijuana and pot and cannabis around my younger kids, I feel like it just in general spurred more open conversation.
Yeah.
The continuing conversation that we're still having to this day.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of the reason I wanted to bring up this cabin experience today was because I believe that's a very common Alaskan experience that we have up here. Many people have cabins, or their family has cabins, and they go out and they relax there, and the rules are a little bit different there, and maybe a little bit more fuzzy, and that might be a place where parents might encounter this situation. And so I just wanted to offer that thought of, if you do happen to walk in on your children passing a bowl around the campfire, or trying to be sneaky in the bunkhouse with no ventilation, then that's a really wonderful time to be able to have these conversations and be able to educate them a little bit and find out, what exactly they know about it, because we didn't have this opportunity. We didn't have educated people that we got to talk about it with. So we just got to learn it from whatever dude was teaching us, whatever street knowledge he had.
Some shaggy copy of High Times that got passed down through 20 people. Yeah. That was where our knowledge came from, if any at all.
Yeah. So thanks for coming here today and sharing that story with us and sharing your experience. And
you're welcome.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think one message I'd like for parents to come away with would be to really think about cannabis and explore those conversations in your head, to yourself, with your spouse, before you need to have it with your child. Figure out what you're going to say, know how you feel about it, look at the facts, and really just educate yourself.
Yeah, I think having that script and the words and the vocabulary that we're going to use, so that we're not having an emotional response. Or I think that when I'm seeing with many parents is that there's an initial like anger response when we see them doing this. And whether we love weed or don't love weed, that anger response seems to be kind of like pretty persistent. And I'm thinking that comes from fear of not knowing how to have these conversations and not knowing the vocabulary to use. And so it is new territory. So thank you for being here, talking about it with me today. This is Aimee Altman, and you're listening to Anchorage Press Podcast.